June 26, 1944. Hollandia Air Base, Dutch New Guinea. The unfinished checkers match lay forgotten as Lieutenant Colonel Charles MacDonald glanced toward his doorway. A stranger had just spoken his name, though MacDonald's attention remained fixed on the board before him. He sat across from Lieutenant Colonel Merrill Smith, who directed operations for Satan's Angels. The visitor stated his name again, this time with understated assurance that demanded notice. Charles Lindbergh. The legendary aviator himself stood in this rudimentary Pacific outpost, requesting a conversation about P-38 fighter tactics. Neither officer could foresee that this interruption would fundamentally alter long-distance combat flying across the Pacific campaign. The methods Lindbergh introduced during the following weeks would push the Lockheed P-38 Lightning's operational range nearly 400 miles beyond existing capabilities, converting theoretical impossibilities into routine practice. This account of a civilian advisor effectively doubling a premier twin-engine fighter's reach transcends mere technical achievement. It chronicles how institutional skepticism yielded to undeniable results, how aviators learned to value calculations over gut instinct, and how one individual's specialized understanding of fuel conservation reshaped Pacific air combat. The principles enabling extended missions weren't recorded in technical publications, but emerged through practical experience among pilots discovering their training had been fundamentally incomplete. The unattainable was approaching reality, and the instructor was a 42-year-old civilian who'd never occupied a P-38 cockpit until 72 hours prior. This pathway to Hollandia's threshold originated 17 years earlier above Atlantic waters. Between May 20th and 21st, 1927, Charles Augustus Lindbergh revolutionized aviation by completing a 3,600-mile solo journey from New York to Paris in 33½ hours. His Ryan NYP aircraft, Spirit of St. Louis, held 450 gallons within tanks so massive they eliminated forward visibility. Navigation relied on periscope observation and calculated reckoning while managing fuel with precision other contemporary pilots would have considered excessive. He touched down at LaGuardia with 85 gallons unconsumed, demonstrating fuel economy aviation experts had deemed unachievable for Wright Whirlwind radial power plants. This meticulous fuel stewardship became Lindbergh's signature technical capability. During the 1930s, while conducting aerial surveys for Pan American Airways spanning Pacific and Atlantic routes, Lindbergh perfected methods that stretched range far past manufacturer predictions. He grasped that published performance data represented typical outcomes rather than absolute boundaries. Each power plant possessed an ideal operational window where thrust generation, fuel usage, and mechanical strain achieved optimal equilibrium. Discovering this window demanded comprehension of interconnected variables, manifold pressure, propeller revolution rates, mixture configurations, and airspeed indicators, extending well beyond conventional instruction. By 1944, Lindbergh had established himself among the world's premier long-distance flight authorities, though his standing with American military leadership remained complicated by pre-war isolationist advocacy. His fervent opposition to American engagement in European warfare, including leadership of the America First Committee, had earned President Franklin Roosevelt's personal hostility. Following Roosevelt's April 29, 1941, public comparison of him to Confederate sympathizer Clement Vallandigham, Lindbergh surrendered his Air Reserve colonel's commission. Pearl Harbor's aftermath found Lindbergh attempting military re-enlistment. Roosevelt personally blocked his return to uniform, yet specialized knowledge finds pathways. Excluded from military ranks, Lindbergh secured civilian consulting positions with aircraft producers. United Aircraft Corporation engaged him in 1943, particularly with their Chance Vought subsidiary manufacturing F-4U Corsairs. He addressed production complications at Ford's Willow Run B-24 facility, conducted hazardous high-altitude P-47 Thunderbolt testing for power plant analysis, and contributed to Corsair dive bombing development. His technical impact proved substantial, but Lindbergh craved combat exposure. Early 1944 presented opportunity. United Aircraft sought feasibility data for new twin-engine fighter concepts. America's sole comparable aircraft was Lockheed's P-38 Lightning. Lindbergh persuaded United Aircraft to dispatch him Pacific Ward as technical observer studying P-38 combat operations. April 3, 1944, found Lindbergh preparing for South Pacific deployment. Brooks Brothers provided an insignia-free naval officer's uniform. At Brentano's, he acquired a compact New Testament, recording in his journal, "Given I can transport only one book, and necessarily small, this represents my selection." A decade passed, this wouldn't have been true, yet increasing learning and reading leave it facing diminishing competition. San Diego departure occurred April 24th, ostensibly toward Marine Corps aviation installations surrounding Guadalcanal. Navy Department authorization remained concealed from the White House. Neither President Roosevelt nor Secretary of the Navy Frank Knox knew Lindbergh approached the combat zone. What commenced as observation evolved when Marine aviation officers invited Lindbergh onto combat sorties as observer. May 21, 1944, marked his inaugural combat flight, a strafing mission with Marine Fighting Squadron 222, targeting Japanese positions near Rabaul. While termed observation, Lindbergh flew with armed weapons, engaging when tactical opportunities emerged. He rapidly demonstrated practical mastery transcending theoretical knowledge. Collaborating with Corsair aviators, he illustrated safe takeoff procedures with bomb loads double the F-4U's rated capacity. Marines had suffered losses from overweight mishaps. Lindbergh's systematic analysis of power configurations, takeoff velocities, and weight distribution reduced accidents while expanding strike potential. News spread throughout Pacific commands that America's famous aviator flew combat missions as civilian while resolving operational challenges, stumping military pilots for months. By mid-June 1944, Lindbergh focused attention on P-38 Lightnings. United Aircraft's twin-engine fighter interest held legitimacy. But Lindbergh recognized the 475th Fighter Group, Satan's Angels, as among the Pacific's elite Lightning units. For comprehensive P-38 understanding, that destination proved ideal. June 15, 1944, Lindbergh secured transport to Finschhafen, New Guinea, announcing arrival at 5th Air Force Headquarters, Nadzab, where Colonel Marion Cooper hosted lunch. Sunday evening, June 18th, brought dinner with General Ennis Whitehead, discussing New Guinea developments and P-38 observation intentions. Authorization remained informal, unofficial, technically insufficient by strict standards. Yet, within Southwest Pacific Theater's fluid command environment, personal relationships and demonstrated capability frequently outweighed documentation. June 20th provided Lindbergh 80 minutes checking out in P-38s with the 8th Fighter Group's 35th Squadron, his inaugural experience with the distinctive twin-boom design. June 26th found him arriving at Hollandia, interrupting Lieutenant Colonel MacDonald's checkers game. MacDonald, 29 years old and already a 10-victory ace, commanded the 475th Fighter Group, activated May 14, 1943 in Australia, subsequently becoming a top-scoring P-38 unit. The group's 3 squadrons, 431st, 432nd, 433rd, operated latest P-38J variants featuring enhanced intercoolers and expanded fuel storage. These Lightnings represented the Pacific's longest-range fighters capable of missions beyond all competitors. Yet, even carrying external tanks, operational radius remained constrained. Distant target missions left minimal fuel for combat maneuvering, with pilots frequently landing with dangerously depleted reserves. Weather-forced detours had claimed several aircraft exceeding fuel capacity. MacDonald initially acknowledged Lindbergh politely before resuming his game. When Lindbergh mentioned General Hutchinson, 3rd Air Task Force commander, had directed him toward P-38 combat operations discussions, MacDonald's attention sharpened. Brief conversation concluded with MacDonald proposing Lindbergh fly next morning's mission. Lindbergh accepted. Dawn launch approached. Rather than headquarters return, MacDonald suggested Lindbergh remain at the 475th camp, eliminating transportation complications. As Lindbergh settled onto a spare cot, word circulated rapidly. Charles Lindbergh would fly with Satan's Angels. Pilot reactions varied. Lieutenant John Perurdy of the 433rd Squadron anticipated meeting the legendary figure. Others expressed skepticism. Some questioned whether a 42-year-old civilian, regardless of fame, could handle modern aerial combat. Major Thomas Maguire, already 15 victories credited and destined to finish as America's second-highest-scoring pilot with 38 confirmed kills, wanted first-hand evaluation of the veteran's capabilities. June 27, 1944 morning found Lindbergh preparing his inaugural P-38 combat sortie. Weather conditions proved poor, steady rainfall at 05:30 hours. By 10:30 takeoff, conditions improved. MacDonald led 4 aircraft toward Jeffman Island and Smart Airfield, regular 475th targets. Lindbergh flew Blue 3 position on Maguire's wing, joined by Merrill Smith, already an 8 victory ace. MacDonald observed Lindbergh maintaining flawless formation positioning on Maguire's wing, remarkably precise for someone barely familiar with the aircraft. Mission objectives included strafing an enemy barge in Kibos Bay. Lindbergh navigated through anti-aircraft fire, cannon, and machine guns, striking targets. Mission success brought all 4 aircraft safely home. Yet ground crew observations following landing would prove more significant than combat actions. When maintenance personnel inspected Lindbergh's P-38 after multiple sorties, patterns emerged. His aircraft consistently returned, carrying substantially greater fuel reserves than other pilots completing identical missions. Following a 6.5-hour armed reconnaissance mission, July 1st, targeting enemy installations along Gilvink Bay's western coastline, Lindbergh landed retaining 210 gallons. Fellow pilots from identical missions returned showing nearly empty gauges. July 3rd found the group escorting 16 B-25 bombers striking Jeffman Island. Post-attack, Lightnings pursued barge targets. Within 1 hour, 2 pilots reported critical fuel levels and departed homeward. Lindbergh continued operations, gauges indicating comfortable reserves. MacDonald recognized the discrepancy and convened a meeting. 2 days following Lindbergh's arrival, the colonel assembled 475th pilots in their recreation facility. Primitive conditions featured packed earth flooring beneath palm thatch roofing, 1 ping-pong table, card decks completing furnishings. Under harsh, unshaded bulbs, MacDonald proceeded directly. He introduced Lindbergh formally, requesting explanation for consistently superior fuel retention compared to any group pilot. Subsequent developments would transform Pacific Theater P-38 operations. Lindbergh addressed assembled aviators, explaining cruise control methods he'd developed for the Lightning. Standard procedures taught all P-38 pilots specified cruising at 2,200-2,400 RPM, with auto-rich mixture settings. These parameters provided adequate power and engine safety considerations, but proved wasteful. Lindbergh explained that reducing engine speed from standard 2,200 RPM down to 1,600 RPM, switching fuel mixture from auto-rich to auto-lean, while slightly elevating manifold pressure compensating for reduced RPM, could dramatically decrease fuel consumption without sacrificing effective cruise velocity. Specific recommendations specified 1,600 RPM at 30 inches, mercury manifold pressure with auto-lean mixture, and 185 mph indicated airspeed. These configurations reduced consumption to approximately 70 gallons hourly, achieving roughly 2.6 miles per gallon. Compared against standard cruise settings consuming significantly more fuel, savings proved enormous. Lindbergh predicted these methods would extend lightning radius 400 miles, enabling 9-hour missions. Concluding his 30-minute presentation, silence filled the room. Pilots contemplated several uncomfortable realities. 9-hour flight duration troubled men already finding 7-hour sorties punishing. P-38 cockpits proved cramped. Pilots occupied parachutes with emergency rafts underneath, survival suits adding discomfort. 7 cockpit hours already pushed human endurance limits. 9 hours seemed inconceivable. More troubling, Lindbergh recommended engine settings they'd been specifically trained to avoid. Low RPM combined with high manifold pressure constituted running over square. Military flight instruction emphasized over-square operation damaged power plants. Resulting detonation would overheat cylinder heads, causing catastrophic failure. Training taught that manifold pressure exceeding RPM by more than minimal amounts risked engine destruction. Now this civilian suggested routinely operating engines under conditions they'd been warned proved dangerous. Room skepticism proved palpable. Several pilots exchanged glances. Some shook heads. One openly declared Lindbergh's technique hazardous. But MacDonald grasped something crucial. Lindbergh spoke from experience, not theory. He'd flown combat missions employing these settings. His P-38 suffered no power plant problems. His aircraft repeatedly returned with fuel reserves, providing operational flexibility others lacked. The colonel decided on practical testing. Success would provide the 475th decisive operational advantage. Failure would reveal itself quickly enough. Over the following week, pilots cautiously experimented with Lindbergh's cruise parameters. Initial flights remained brief, allowing rapid base return if engines showed distress signs. First pilots attempting the technique nervously reported their engines sounded different at lower RPM. Allison V1710 power plant character changed, yet temperature gauges remained normal. Oil pressure stayed within acceptable parameters. Cylinder head temperatures, critical detonation indicators, actually ran cooler than at higher RPM settings. As confidence developed, pilots employed Lindbergh's methods on extended missions. Fuel savings proved undeniable. Missions previously requiring immediate post-strike returns could now include extended combat air patrol. Flights forcing careful fuel monitoring concluded with comfortable reserves. P-38 effective combat radius, previously approximately 570 miles, extended to 700 miles, then 750 miles. Pilots discovered they could reach previously impossible targets, fight 15 minutes over target areas, and return with 1-hour fuel reserves. The transformation proved revolutionary. Skepticism evaporated as successive missions validated technique effectiveness. Lindbergh flew regularly with the 475th, accumulating combat hours while teaching through demonstration. He led flights, proving civilian observers could handle combat matching any military pilot. On missions he led, his call sign remained simple: Mr. Lindbergh. Lindbergh explained underlying physics helping pilots comprehend why it functioned. Aircraft power plants generate thrust by burning fuel, creating pressure-driving pistons. Fuel burned per time unit determines consumption. The objective: maximize efficiency, producing maximum power from minimum fuel. Traditional high RPM cruise settings generated ample power but wasted fuel through rapid engine cycling, burning fuel unnecessarily. Reducing RPM while increasing manifold pressure produced identical power through fewer combustion cycles, each consuming fuel more efficiently. Lean mixture settings further improved efficiency by providing precisely sufficient fuel for complete combustion, eliminating excess used in auto-rich mode for high-power cooling. Engines avoided detonation because power settings, though numerically over square, didn't constitute actual high-power operation. 30-inch manifold pressure remained moderate, well below 60-inch war emergency power used for takeoff and combat. Lower RPM actually reduced mechanical component stress. The technique wasn't dangerous, simply different from standard training. Lindbergh's expertise emerged from years practicing long-distance flight. His 1927 Atlantic crossing taught him published specifications represented starting points, not limits. His 1930s Pan American Airways work surveying trans-Pacific and transatlantic routes provided thousands of hours for fuel management experimentation. The P-38 offered advantages making experimentation less risky than apparent. Twin engines. If one power plant suffered experimental technique damage, the second could bring pilots home. Across the vast Pacific, where mechanical failure meant drowning or Japanese capture, most single-engine fighter pilots flew conservatively. But P-38 redundancy created margins for safely exploring performance envelopes, and Lindbergh knew supply situations made risks acceptable. Allison shipped spare V-1710 power plants and components to the Pacific generously. If engines required replacement following experimental operation, ground crews could install fresh power plants quickly. Extended-range operational advantages justified accepting minimal engine wear risk. Calculations proved correct. No P-38 power plants failed due to Lindbergh's cruise techniques. By late July 1944, Lindbergh's cruise control methods spread throughout 5th Air Force P-38 units. The 475th Fighter Group's success proved impossible to ignore. Word spread between squadrons. Pilots talked. Ground crews compared fuel consumption data. Other commanders desired identical operational advantages Satan's angels now enjoyed. Lindbergh delivered additional presentations to other unit pilots, patiently explaining techniques, answering technical questions, addressing engine safety concerns. Adoption proved neither immediate nor universal, but remained steady. July 28, 1944, brought Lindbergh's most dramatic 475th moment. The mission escorted bombers toward the Ceram area, flying with the 433rd Squadron. Lindbergh flew Blue 3 in four-ship flight over El Puti Bay. Blue Flight encountered enemy aircraft, two Mitsubishi Ki-51 Sonyas, Japanese light bombers employed for reconnaissance and ground attack, returning from searching for missing comrades. The Sonyas belonged to the 73rd Independent Flying Chutai, one piloted by Unit Commanding Officer Captain Saburo Shimada, the other by Sergeant Yokogi. American fighters attacked. Sonyas were outmatched. Slower, less maneuverable, lightly armed compared to Lightnings. They should have provided easy victories, but Shimada was experienced and refused easy death. The engagement became running battle. 9th Fighter Squadron P-38s had located the Sonyas first and were already engaged when McDonald's flight arrived. Shimada's wingman, Sergeant Yokogi, absorbed cannon fire from Lieutenant Wade Lewis. The Sonya's left wing ignited, As the enemy aircraft straightened, attempting escape, Lieutenant J.C. Haslip positioned behind firing extended bursts. The stricken Sonia trailed smoke diving into ocean. Shimada's Sonia continued fighting. For 30 minutes, the Japanese captain outmaneuvered multiple attacking P-38s, throwing his aircraft through violent banks, wingtips streaming condensation as he racked the Sonia through maximum rate turns. P-38 pilots attempted establishing firing solutions, but couldn't maintain aim points. The slower Japanese aircraft could turn inside faster American fighters. Captain Danforth Miller, McDonald's wingman, briefly acquired the Sonia in gun sights but lost tracking as Shimada completed hard left turns. Miller's tracers fell 80 feet behind. Then Shimada acted unexpectedly. Rather than continuing evasive maneuvers, he turned directly toward approaching Lindbergh. Both aircraft flew head-on at nearly 500 mph closing speed. For Lindbergh, thousands of flight hours experienced but never facing enemy aircraft attempting to kill him, the moment crystallized with terrible clarity. Shimada maintained course. Whether attempting ramming attack or simply hoping to exchange head-on fire, the Japanese captain committed to collision course. Lindbergh instinctively sighted the Sonia's radial engine and pressed his trigger. P-38 armament, one 20mm cannon and 4 50-caliber machine guns concentrated nose-mounted, erupted for 6 seconds. Lindbergh held the trigger. Bullets and shells hammered the Sonia's forward section. The Mitsubishi's propeller visibly decelerated. Smoke poured from the engine, yet Shimada held course. At final moments, Lindbergh pulled up violently, his P-38 passing over the damaged Sonia with feet separating them. Shimada's aircraft entered steep dive. Other P-38s fired additional bursts. The Sonia continued diving, trailing smoke until striking ocean at high velocity. White spray fountains marked impact. Foam spread in concentric circles across water surface. Then waves merged back into sea. Surface appeared as before. Captain Saburo Shimada and his observer were dead. Back at base, kill credit discussions occurred. Multiple pilots had struck the Sonia. McDonald, Miller, and Lindbergh all scored hits, but Lindbergh's head-on burst had mortally wounded the aircraft, decelerating the propeller and initiating fatal dive. Unofficially, pilots agreed. Lindbergh had scored his first and only kill. Victory wasn't entered in the 475th's official war record. Lindbergh was civilian. His combat participation already proved irregular. Recording official kills would raise questions, potentially ending his unit time. 3 days later, August 1st, Lindbergh nearly died. The mission was fighter sweep to Palau Islands. The flight encountered Japanese Zeros. In ensuing dogfight, Lindbergh found himself in turning fight with a Zero pilot who very nearly shot him down. Only McDonald's intervention, calling break right, before engaging the Zero himself, saved Lindbergh's life. The close call convinced 5th Air Force headquarters that enough was enough. Lindbergh had proven his techniques worked. He'd flown approximately 50 combat missions across all Pacific service, including about 25 P-38 missions with the 475th. He'd shot down enemy aircraft. He'd nearly been killed. Time to return him to the United States before something went irreversibly wrong. August 12, 1944, Lindbergh departed Hollandia, returning home. The 475th Fighter Group pilots gathered for his departure. Their respect for the civilian technical representative proved genuine. He hadn't merely taught them techniques extending their combat radius. He'd flown with them, fought with them, and proven himself in conditions where rank and fame meant nothing. Lindbergh's fuel efficiency techniques' impact extended far beyond the 475th Fighter Group. By October 1944, P-38 units throughout the Pacific employed variations of his cruise control settings. Specific numbers varied slightly between units and conditions, but the principle proved universal: lower RPM, higher manifold pressure, leaner mixture, all combined dramatically extending range. Operational implications proved profound. Previously unreachable targets became accessible. Japanese bases enjoying immunity from fighter escorts now faced P-38s with sufficient fuel for target area combat and safe home return. Charles Augustus Lindbergh died August 26, 1974, age 72, from lymphoma at his Kipahulu, Maui home. He'd secretly left Columbia Presbyterian Medical Center in New York on August 17th, arriving Maui 1 week before death. Burial occurred approximately 3 hours after death in simple handmade coffin built by Hawaiian ranch cowboys wearing work clothes in grave 30 feet deep, lined with lava rock and black beach pebbles at Palapala Ho'omau Church Cemetery. Only 15 people attended. The grave marker is simple concrete slab with Psalm 139 epitaph, "If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea." Lindbergh's Pacific legacy transcends combat victories or missions flown. It's the knowledge shared and techniques taught. He arrived as observer and departed as instructor. He came as celebrity and left as comrade, and he transformed aircraft capabilities through nothing more than understanding how it truly functioned and having courage to prove better methods existed. Satan's Angels pilots knew what Lindbergh had given them. They flew farther, fought longer, and returned safer because of knowledge freely shared by a civilian who understood fuel efficiency better than anyone else in the Pacific. That knowledge, proven in combat and adopted throughout the theater, represents one of the Pacific Air War's most successful technical innovations.